Okay, welcome to Stampscaping 101. This is a stamp-along scene that I've just created here. And this one is going to be featuring, some specific designs right here. The meadow, the rocky peaks, the eerie moon, a couple reeds, tiny rocks, and this one is the old man and dog, okay? But this stamp-along is really more concept-based, okay? So you can mix and match or change your composition around however you want, okay? This stamp-along is more about this kind of dynamic, kind of diagonal lighting dynamic between a light source and the reflected light down below. And when it comes to a situation like this, that kind of reflected light makes a perfect spot for some sort of spotlit subject matter. I could put, a deer in there, wolves running, whatever. It could be anything. You could have an open area down here and put some kind of word stamp that says happy birthday or something like that. Or, I don't know, some little quote about the moon or something like this. This could be stars up here that are illuminated or something like that. Anything you want, okay? But one of the things that I'm doing here in this stamp-along, and I'll reiterate it throughout the course of this lesson here, is when it comes to coloring, it's the retention of certain light areas within your given spaces. So in this case, it happens to be the sky up here. We have light and dark up there. We have this mountain in the background, so there's an area of light and dark within that space. And then when we get to our foreground, right down here, we have it light and dark. So one of the things that I used to do in my classes is, when I would see people it was kind of hard sometimes, when you get a lot of people in a class, but I'd just be reiterating the same thing over. I would just say, okay, remember to retain your lighter areas. And that was mostly when they got into their mid-tones and darker tones. It's just a reminder not to tone everything out, which is often one of the, it's kind of one of the urges or kind of the natural things to do if you see a mountain. It's to fill it in, it's to color it in a certain way. But the difference between, say, coloring and lighting is kind of more of a specific coloring where you retain certain areas of the lightness that you have within there. So it's not coloring every object or space uniformly, okay? So we have a value range of light and dark within each one of these spaces. It doesn't always have to be white too dark or something like that, but there has to be a range in here for something to kind of represent either that light source or the reflected light within these spaces. So if you do this as a stamp-along, when you get into the darker tones, and I'll be reminding you of this in the video, it's just to kind of be a little bit more perimeter-oriented, especially when you get into the dark tones, okay? So this one's all about, kind of the placement of some sort of light source in one corner of your paper, and then in the opposite corner of it, that will be your kind of illuminated area for the most part. And if you have these kind of, objects or distances in between, like a mountain or something like that, those will also be kind of included within that kind of path of light. So just retain certain areas of light in it and not just tone the whole thing out, okay? So anyways, this is working on a quarter-page card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It's using dye-based inks. I use the Marvies right here, but you can certainly mix and match if you're using some distress inks, and you have a lot of distress ink pads and whatnot. You probably already have your favorite blue, but you can use things like tumbled glass, broken china, blueprint sketch. If you're using Memento, there's the summer sky, Danube blue, Bahama blue, light, medium, and dark if you haven't, okay? And black ink. And you'll be ready to go. So anyways, I do mention some alternative things that you can use to create this scene in here. If you don't have a mountain or something like that, just go with meadow and sky or something like that. You'll just have a little bit more area to fill in with your blues, but just keep it nice and simple and kind of focus in on the concept of this lesson, which is that kind of that diagonal treatment of lighting, okay? All right, so get all set, and I hope you join in, and I hope you have a great time. Okay, it's time for another stamp along. Okay, the previous video that I did, I talked about Thomas Cole. I have this book called The Hudson River School of American Landscape Artists. You can find a lot of information on them online, but it was kind of a movement. I don't even know what years it was, but they were kind of like romanticized American landscapes, and it kind of brought back landscape painting, and there was a certain area, around the Hudson River and whatever, maybe the Adirondack area, New York. I don't know. It's been a while since I read up on that, but I really like a lot of these artists, and one of them was Thomas Cole. I really love his pieces, and I was lucky enough to even see some of his originals while I was touring upstate New York one time. But these really large pieces, this one's 52 and 7/8 by 77 and 7/8 inch. Okay, looks like they're all around that size, but they're just immense. They're really gigantic pieces. But it has, I don't even know how many there were, 4 or 5 of these pieces, but they're really quite dramatic, and the lighting and everything in them, and then just the overall tone of them was really quite amazing. But it kind of follows the voyage of life. It goes to childhood, youth, this is manhood right here. Looks like he's being put to the test and whatnot. And old age, this angel, in the heavenly light kind of taking him up. But anyways, what I want to focus in on here, which is what I kind of did in my previous one, I wasn't thinking about these scenes here, but I remembered, oh yeah, when I was doing that really large scale piece, was just this really dramatic compositional diagonal within here. And let's see if I can zoom in on all these things. This one's not quite as apparent here, but you have this lighting coming from here, and you have this figure right here, so it kind of has this kind of dynamic, diagonal, compositional element in here between. It could be light source and reflected light, but it could be kind of like a destination type of thing as well. And you get these figures kind of looking up towards that area, so it sets up this kind of visual path of this strong diagonal, and it creates, this dynamic compositional element within the piece. Look at this one right here. You have this little angel up here. And then you have the man down below here. Right, but the lighting is really strongly illuminated over here, so you kind of follow along this kind of path right here, but there's this really strong element right here. And then, of course, on this one right here, it's really quite apparent, and you even have these kind of subtle light beams shining down this way, creating that really strong compositional element. And they're all about the same kind of distance from, the edges right here in terms of the reflected light. So that's fun to do. I'd really recommend playing around. You can play around with things like thematically, compositionally, lighting, whatnot, and doing sequential stamp pieces that are, they could be in a triptych format where you can kind of display them all together, or you can do them in sequences. You can do things with a seasonal theme too. You can do the same exact composition but do them in different colors. But anyways, okay, this is going to be a stamp along, and this is what you're going to be using. Okay, now everything in here really is just, it's really more about the concept, so don't get caught too much up in specifics. You can, of course, get the same, exact same images if you want. We're not opposed to that, of course. But things like this meadow here, if you have like some trees, that you just want to stamp out, if you have something like the sedge filler, you can do this, and I don't know, some trees like this along this instead of this. I'm going to put a mountain in this one. any kind of sky figure that you want. If you don't have like a moon or something like that, you can just kind of leave, you know, you can do one of those things where you cut out a little round, you know, punch like this, and you just kind of mask it off and put some color over it and peel that up, and voila, you have a moon, okay? And we'll have some kind of figure in here, but what we're going to be doing, I think I'll do a couple videos based on that kind of real dynamic angled light source and reflected light kind of compositional arrangement within the piece. I think it's really good to do. And when you do those types of things like that and you really make it apparent, you know, where some light source is reflecting off of your objects, it really looks like you know what you're doing, okay? And you do know what you're doing, but, you know, it looks, I don't know, kind of more sophisticated than, you know, it really is, and people are always mentioning that type of thing with me, and my things are, you know, my structures within my compositions are really quite simple. A lot of other people do much more you know, dynamic and complex arrangements than I do, okay? I try to keep things fairly simple, but now in the end result, maybe they look fairly complicated, but they're really not. All right, and I'll show you what that is in this piece right here. Okay, now let's see. We can do it a couple different ways. I was thinking I have that mountain and that moon, so if I do that, maybe I'll have to do that really low. So maybe I'll switch off like this, and maybe I'll go vertical like this, portrait, okay? And I've just inked this up in black. Okay, we're going to do this moon scene, so we'll keep it really quite simple. Okay, this is the meadow. I'm stamping it, no, I'd say it's about 2 inches off the bottom in terms of that, that horizon. If you're a little bit worried, stamp it a little bit lower, something like that, okay? And again, this is the Meadow Large 057G stamp. It just gives me the rocks and trees and tree line and kind of grassy texture all in one impression. So it's just very fast. I don't have to stamp out several things, but like I said, you could. Okay, Rocky Peaks, okay? This one's the 188F. We're just going to take that. And this bottom part here, yeah, let's practice some good habits. Let's wipe off a little of this bottom right here, okay? Just make it a little bit drier. And then where you wipe it off right there, make sure that you have the mountain going right down into those trees. Don't stamp it like right down here in the meadow, but just have this bottom portion, this, I don't know, 1/2 inch or so that I've wiped off, going anywhere within that 1/2 inch there, okay? And where I've wiped it off on the bottom portion, if you haven't seen these videos before, it's so that it'll stamp out lighter down here, okay, in this bottom portion, as it stamps over those tree, that, you know, that silhouette of that tree line right back there. So if I stamp this out darker, you could do that, but that tree line definition won't be quite as distinct as it would be if you stamp this out in more of a gray, which it stamps out in if you wipe it off, because drier means lighter. All right, now, one of the things that I used to do with my workshops when I used to teach those all the time, live in-person workshops, or even make and takes or something like that, but especially the workshops, when I had people start off their scenes, I didn't work people through specifics so much. Maybe on their first scene I did, but after that, in terms of the compositional element of it, or aspect of it, what I would have people do is I would just have people pick out some kind of land element. Now in this one I picked out, you know, the meadow and my mountain, okay? But in class what we would do is we would just pick out some kind of land element, and then a sky element. It could be a Milky Way, it could be a sun, it could be a moon, it could be clouds and a moon, whatever. But it was just generally 2 different areas. But I would just, you know, usually if it was their first scene where they were just composing on their own, I just had them keep it simple and just pick out 2 elements, land and sky. So it could be a cabin and a moon, a lake and a sun, a mountain and stars, something like that, okay? Stamp out your land element in black, all right? And then what we would do is I would have them pick out some kind of color scheme that they'd be working on. If it was a cool tone moonlit night, I would have them grab all of their blue pads like that and put, stack them up. If it was going to be a sunset scene, I'd have them grab all of their oranges, reds, yellows, and things like that and pull them aside. And then what we would do is we would pick out a color. I usually recommended to them to pick at least a medium to darker tone to stamp their sky figure in, okay? I don't want them stamping it so light, which they could, but if I stamp this out in a really light blue, by the time I started blending some of those lighter blues into it and darker blues, we wouldn't be able to see as much of the image. So I'd have them stamp it out darker so that when we put the tones over it, we'd still be able to see the image if it's stamped out kind of in a medium to darker tone at least. Okay? All right. I will just stamp this one out in a Prussian blue. Okay, it's a pretty dark blue. It's the darkest of the blues that I have right here. If you don't have this brand, just pick out any kind of brand that you have. Mix and match too. If you have reinkers, you can use those. You can't stamp out an image in a reinker, but you can certainly color it in with a reinker. Alright, now I'm going to wipe this off a little bit on my bottom part, and I'm going to just stamp this right over my mountain, okay? With some sky images, maybe you'll have to mask off a little of those mountain peaks, but this one right here, it's all toned down here, so I've kind of made it where you really don't have to. Yeah, some of that image stamps into that mountain right there, but I'm going to be coloring in the mountain anyway, so I'm really not worried about that. Okay, let's worry, or not worry, but let's think about our other images that we'll stamp into the scene later, okay? All right. What we're going to do is now this is a concept right here, this lighting concept in our scene is going to be something that is not media specific, okay? So you can do this in colored pencils, chalks, whatever. There's this kind of this diagonal type of lighting concept, okay? It's going to be light over here, source of light, and your figurine or whatever your spotlit area is going to just be in the opposite corner. Okay, so if you stamp this moon, if it was over here, then you would have this lit out this way. Okay, but what makes that our light source? Okay, well, we can obviously see a moon up here. By the way, if I stamped that out in a brown or a red or something like that and brought yellows and oranges into it, that would suddenly be a sun. So, without things like craters or something like that, you can mix and match, or, you can switch, the entire image definition. I don't know what you'd call it. You can change suns to moons and moons to suns. Okay. All right. I am just taking my applicator here, and I'm taking this and applying it into my surrounding area. So now I have more of a light source because it is illuminated. Okay. I'm not going to spend too much time, working on minutia in this, because this is more about the concept of it. Okay, now here's the thing. If you have a mountain or something like that, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to leave some of that mountain light so it looks like the light is shining or reflecting off of some of those areas on the mountain, okay? Just in general, you see those darker areas within the mountain? I mean, there's different lines. I mean, you don't have to get too specific, but just in general, what I do is I like darkening some of those areas a little bit more. And some of the areas that don't have too much light, I just leave them as is, okay? It doesn't really matter where. All right, now here we are in the meadow. All right. And what I'll do is I'll direct our, eye over this way a little bit by leaving some area over here. That tree's a little bit in my way. I wish I could have, if that tree, I should have stamped the meadow a little bit off, or maybe I should have just not stamped this tree right here so I can have my little figure here illuminated more, but it'll be a slight diagonal right here. So we still have that angle working in here, okay? But do you see that there? That's lighting right there. It's just leaving some areas a little bit lit. And I've talked about this in the past too, in terms of kind of your lighting schemes. It just means that don't color everything uniformly, okay? So we have this area up here in the sky. This is dark, this is light. Here's my mountain, darker, lighter, and here's my meadow, darker, lighter. So where people kind of, take a little bit of time to get into the concept of lighting, it's never been a matter of them not doing something, okay? Well, unless you see it this way, but what usually, it's not something that they've applied, it's something that they haven't kind of avoided. So a lot of times when they see a mount like this, the instinct, if you're coming over from other types of stamping, is to color that whole thing in. Or here's this grassy area, so we see that, and we color the whole thing in green or something like that. Or in this case, if it's nighttime, I said it was blue, they color in the whole thing, so they just don't retain some areas of light. So it's just really a matter of putting kind of the brakes on the coloring when it comes to whatever tones that we add down there. But let's take a look at this again, okay? Now it's really easy from here. I mean, not that that was hard, but what you're going to do now is you're going to work into your next darker tone of blue, okay? But here's the thing, just apply it really quite lightly. Utilize the ink on your applicator too a little bit longer. Don't kind of re-ink it quite as much, because you still have the ink from your previous color on there, and your next color is going to be darker inherently, okay? So what you do is that ink goes a little further, okay, before you really need to re-ink it. And what that does is, see, when I'm adding this down here, I'm really able to get a very faint version of it, okay? And that way I avoid coloring in, the areas that were intended to be left light, okay? What happens is, we get the feel, what I'm getting at right here, why I'm saying that, reiterating that, is because in my classes, it was getting people, I was teaching composition, we're teaching color, whatever, not structure, but color, I don't know, color blending, I guess. It's really more value blending, lights, mediums, darks. And I'm teaching lighting here and whatnot. But it was also getting the feel of adding ink to paper, okay? And getting, kind of used to the idea of overlapping it. So people would be going like this, and, sometimes they start scrubbing. I'd tell them not to do that, and we would get everyone's kind of techniques refined, okay? If you're using, your cosmetic sponges or something like that, you're just, let me see, I just cleaned mine up, but you'd just be dabbing it in there and just dab it in from the edge like that. Okay, but going back to what I was talking about, people would get really familiar with this after, it only takes like one color, and then it's like, oh, okay, I got it. And what happens is, if you move to your darker tones, okay, you get into this tone or this tone, sometimes they're coloring it in, adding their color in at the same rate as they did with a really light color. And if they're doing that and coming in here with a much darker color than their lightest one, then you would there would be a chance of kind of eradicating that lighting, reflected lighting in there again. So we just want to kind of avoid coloring in the whole thing and losing, in this case, it would be more of the reflected light. All right? Okay, so moving along here. Okay, now see this lighting over here? Let me kind of move this lighting over here a little bit more. So here I'm doing a little bit of fine tuning, but I'm just coloring in a little bit more of this and bringing that light over here a little bit more. Okay, now this is a Caribbean blue. The first blue that I used was salvia blue. The next one was light blue. This is a Caribbean blue right here. If it was Memento, you'd be doing like Summer Sky, Bahama Blue and Blue Danube or something. You can use your Distress inks and Tumbled Glass, Blueprint ink and Broken China. Something like that. Light, medium, dark. Okay? Let's see how strong our lighting is getting now. All right. Okay, now here's a little bit of fine-tuning. I like to put a little bit of shadow, like underneath these rocks in here, you know, or, you know, you can put it in the trees or something like that, but you can leave a little bit of your rocks or something like that a little bit lighter. So it looks like those are reflecting the light as well. Caribbean blue, we're almost there. This is just called blue, and it's more of a, like a navy blue. You don't have to go this dark, you know, you can stop at any time. The darker you take something, though, the lighter the areas where you've retained the white or light area will seem lighter by contrast if you make the area around it darker, though. So it just kind of emphasizes that lighting even, you know, even stronger, you know, this concept of this dynamic between light source and reflected light. So that, I'm kind of staying more in the corners now. I'm not even coming in here anymore. Kind of going more, a little bit more perimeter oriented. All right. A lot of you won't have this color. It's fantastic. I'm going to be doing some ordering with Marvy for a customer, fellow stamper of ours. But I'm going to be ordering several of the re-inkers and blank pads, okay? I'll put together a list of some colors that are some of my favorites, and if you want just to kind of really add a bit of an intensity boost to your other colors from other companies, I'll put together a list of some of the Marvy inks that I really like that can do just that. They're very, very bright inks. I haven't tested out every ink on the market, but I have never come across any that even come close to the brightness of Marvy before. There might be certain colors that are, you know, very bright, but none across the board are nearly as bright as Marvy. And they just kind of add a little bit of intensity to things. But sometimes it's too much. You know, I don't want everything looking like hot green or something like that in a meadow, you know, or like a neon green meadow, you know, where I'm doing green grass and whatnot. So I typically like them in conjunction with other pads, you know, that are a little bit more mellow and maybe kind of earthy and whatnot, but I like that kind of inner glow in many cases that kind of Marvy inks provide. And unfortunately, they don't have these pads like this in the color-coded cases, but they do have blank cases and re-inkers, okay? Anyways, this is black now, and I'm just putting this all around my perimeter like this, okay? So here's what you do. Here's what my recommendation would be. Kind of really put it into the four corners like this, okay? And that will really frame your scene off very nicely. I'm putting some around my tree line. You can put some like in this mountain right over here. Okay, so it's kind of like you're going from, in every area here, sky, land, or sky, mountain, sky background, I guess you can say. Sky, background, foreground, we have light and dark. On the mountain we have light and dark. In the meadow we have light and dark, okay? And that's, you know, scene lighting for you. You know, we can certainly get more complex like that, but I really never do. I just make sure there's kind of a range of values in every area, you know, that I have within a scene. Foreground, midground, background, sky, or something like that. Light and dark in every one of those. Don't just color everything out, okay? So it's, in some ways, it's, I wouldn't say it's easier, but it's certainly faster. I mean, if I took the time to color all of that area in there, it's adding more ink, right? Retaining my lighter areas in here is using less ink, which means less applications. Okay, that being said, let's stamp it. You can stamp any kind of figure in here. What I always say, this is like, kind of like staging too. It's like creating a stage for your players, your actors on stage, okay? This is the old man and dog stamp. And I'm putting them right in the spotlight area, okay? So it really reinforces. This is light source and reflected light down here on the diagonal. But then you have this little figure down here now. And people will look at that moon up there and look at that figure down here, okay? It creates this kind of this visual dialogue is I don't know, I think that's usually how I put it. Between your light source and your reflected light. Okay, let's kind of reinforce this even more, okay? So if I put things kind of in my foreground like this, I can kind of direct our viewer's eye a little bit more. See those reeds right there? See, these reeds kind of go out like that and over here, and I have them kind of pointing in here, so it kind of focuses our attention in there a little bit more. If you have them, I mean, you certainly don't need them, but I have a couple different sizes of these reeds, you know. It's just one of those little subtle things you can do. It's a little bit more needly, but it gives us a little bit more kind of dimension in that foreground. One of the things that's really fun too. I talked about this in one of my videos, talking about going from something that's really quite, you know, basic to a little bit more sophisticated, and that's simply, okay? And that's, I'm into simple in terms of application. I like looking at complex looking things, but I certainly don't want the process to be complicated or anything like that when I'm stamping, okay? But if you have your colors here, here's some of my dark blue, you just switch off and you can add a little bit more layering in something like foreground by stamping out your foreground imagery in multiple values, okay? It's going to be really quite subtle, but you have a little bit more depth built up within this space. You see these reeds in here? Some of them are kind of look like they're a little bit farther back. And all you're doing is you're just using your color scheme, okay? You can even use black, and you blot it once, and you go in there, and you've created a little bit of depth in that foreground right there, All right, let me see. Little things you can do. Let's do that too here. I mean, this is pretty much done here. We have that strong kind of diagonal dynamic here. Let's stamp some of this little rocky, tiny rock stamp right here, okay? So this right here, it just kind of gives a little bit more texture and complexity to that given space, doesn't it, with those little rocks down here. But let's just stamp it out like that and put it a lighter version in there. Or let's go in with our blue here. This is the Prussian blue, okay? And I'll stamp out a couple Prussian blue impressions of it, okay? So look at this right here. Suddenly, simple little tweaks like that, stamping it out twice, you know, or I don't know, that could be the third time where it's barely visible. And some of these rocks are black and some of them are blue. But what do? That's why we have our color scheme here. You know, and you can just stamp these things out in other types of tones right here. So anyways, let's take a look at this and just reiterate what we've done in terms of the concept, okay? We have, in this case, sky and land. We do have that mountain in here, but we've stamped it out in our sky figure, which I tend to think is the thing that kind of sets the mood of the scene. If it's a sunset or a sun or something like that on the horizon, whatever, that would be stamped in the color that it's casting down there. So that's just my general concept. So if you're doing a warm tone scene or something like that, why not stamp it in the color that it's casting? In this case, we got a moonlight scene. Land down here in black, or land elements in black, sky in blue. Bring in your tones, starting with your lightest colors, and to define our light source, retain some white up here, you know, around in here on our light source, and on our background mountain, and our foreground meadow in this case. All right, and then just as you get incrementally darker, you know, it could be like 3 tones blue, it could be 2 or something like that. You just kind of become a little bit more perimeter oriented when you get into the darker tones, okay? Don't bring them in quite as far as you did. You know, you can do, a lot of you have things like Copic markers and alcohol markers and whatnot, okay? If you're using dye-based things, you can come in here and, you know, you can add color to your shadows and things like that, you know. I can add it down here on my meadows, around in here. So, you know, I can add these lighter tones too. You can color, you know, but just, you know, kind of follow the same concept as we've done here with the dye-based inks, okay? Here's a little bit of a lighter one. Maybe that I could have started that one. But see, I can just go in here and color straight in here. Some people say you can't color on glossy paper with alcohol markers. I don't know, maybe that's for certain things, but I certainly haven't had any kind of problem. See, I'm putting a little bit of shadow underneath them too. So you can add in some really fantastic details in here. If you're doing something like this, you can just kind of reiterate kind of the shading formula that you find on the design. So if it's a dark area, you just color in that darker area with some of your pen. Okay, but anyways, remember to retain those lighter areas. You know, when you move into your darker areas, we get really comfortable blending in those lighter tones very quickly, okay? Because they're so light, so we kind of take them in our scene fairly quick. Change your pace and stay a little bit more perimeter oriented, okay? Before taking those colors in, all right? And we are done here. Keep that kind of angle fair. I should have emphasized this a little bit more by moving it over there and kind of moving this one. But it has a different feel when you're doing that kind of dynamic structure of kind of more of a corner-to-corner type of thing. I should have pushed this one over there and pushed this one over here a little bit. But, I mean, you can certainly put this dead center and have that moonlight right here shining down on this figure right here. It has a different feel to it, though, than that slanted edge like this. When you start doing things like that, it adds a little visual movement, you know, because you kind of put this thing there and what, you know, things slide down, so oftentimes you kind of the visual path that you'll take your viewer on is something like a little slide like this as they're, you know, kind of looking, you know, at that right there, and then they go down to this one right here. So you're kind of taking your viewers on a specific kind of visual path when you're doing that type of a thing right there. All right. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've stamped along with me, I want to thank you for joining me. And I hope this kind of lesson, you know, is something that you might like and incorporate in with future scenes, okay? In terms of just kind of structuring your lighting. And we'll do a few more of these. I really love this type of kind of visual path. And, I don't know, taking the viewers on a specific, I don't know, just that visual path. Okay, thanks for watching.